Roman Kantserov is coming to North America.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome on in to Locked On Blackhawks. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. On today's episode, I'll get into the very exciting news regarding Roman Kantserov, plus a beefy prospects update out of the OHL, as well as my Blackhawks better late than never end of season awards. What's going on, everyone? Thank you all, as always, for joining me on today's episode. Real quick, make sure to go and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, all that good stuff. But opening things up here on today's episode, my guy, Roman Kantserov, is officially North America bound as news dropped last Friday that the 2023 second-round pick, the 44th overall selection, had officially terminated his contract in the KHL with Metallurg Magnitogorsk so that he can sign his entry-level contract with the Blackhawks. And now, this was expected to be the case all along, right? And we've known Kantserov's contract with Magnitogorsk was set to expire this summer for the last couple of years. We've been waiting for this for a while, but I did think it was, somewhat significant in how fast Roman made this decision, even though it was always expected to be the next path for him. This occurred, less than 1 week after he and Magnitogorsk were unfortunately eliminated from the Gagarin Cup playoffs. And I know Russian prospects coming over to North America, transitioning to the NHL, there's not as many hiccups as, there once was in that department. But still, I do think it's nice that KD gets to check off this box early on in the offseason, doesn't really have to stress any potential, situation unfolding with Kantserov and maybe him being hesitant about coming to North America. But as I said, this decision came just a couple of days after he and Magnitogorsk were knocked out of the KHL postseason, unfortunately fell to Akbars 4-1 in the semifinals after winning both of their first two playoff series 4-1. Magnitogorsk was the best team in the entire KHL during the regular season and just unfortunately came up short in their quest for a league championship, which would have been Kantserov's second in 3 years with the club. And it really wasn't, the most effective postseason out of Kantserov, which was a little bit disappointing. He only totaled 8 points, 4 goals, and 4 assists in his 15 postseason appearance. It was, kind of how he ended the regular season as well, on a little bit of a cold stretch there, but altogether, his 21-year-old season playing in the highest professional league over in Russia. I mean, it was an unbelievable year for Kantserov, leading the league in the regular season with 36 goals, also tied for 9th in the KHL in scoring with 64 points in 63 games. Something that I've outlined on the show a couple of times recently is that he became the first player age 21 or younger in league history to finish with a points per game margin of 1 or better. He eclipsed that 1.0 figure with 64 points in 63 games. And then he also had the most goals and points ever in the KHL by a player age 23 or younger. And like I said, he did this as a 21-year-old. And joined some real elite company by becoming the first player to lead the KHL in goals at 21 years old since Kirill Kaprizov. Rightfully, because of the year that Kantserov had, a lot of us are super excited about him making this transition. And now that he is officially bound for North America, gives the Blackhawks another very talented winger for next season, which, of course, they desperately need to give Connor Bedard some more support inside the top 6. And based on Kantserov's past experience playing at the professional level, very similarly to Anton Frondel, because he does have that experience under his belt, I fully expect him to be part of the Blackhawks NHL roster come opening night next season, and very likely going to be utilized somewhere inside of the top 6, maybe even alongside Bedard on the top line. That's, ultimately going to be determined by how they want to use Anton Frondel, whether that's at center or whether that's on the wing. It's also going to depend on what ultimately Kyle Davidson does in the trade market and the free agent market here during this offseason. But I really expect Kantserov to be a figure of the Blackhawks top 6. And I also am expecting him to be in the bumper role on the Blackhawks power play, which seriously has me so stoked because Kantserov did a lot of his best work with Magnitogorsk this season in the bumper role, rifling one-timers from the low slot. I also thought he did a good job of using his hand-eye coordination to get some nice redirect goals. And thinking about how the Blackhawks power play operated late in the season when they, went with 5 forwards. They have Connor Bedard and Anton Frondell out there, 2 guys who can absolutely rip the puck from those circles. Bedard playing at the point has some extra shooting opportunities there as well. But just thinking about, Connor Bedard on the left circle, Anton Frondell on the right, and then Roman Kantserov in the middle. It just makes so many dangerous avenues for the opposing penalty kill to have to defend. That has me super excited for what the Blackhawks man advantage could look like with those 3 guys. I mean, all able to rifle shots at a very high level. So, yeah, I'm really stoked to see Roman Kantserov and what he has to offer at the highest level. One thing I will say is, as a 5'9" forward, it's not going to be the easiest transition for him. It's obviously going to be another hurdle compared to the KHL, but I do think it was impressive the way that he got by as an undersized player in that league. Does a lot of good things with his skating, can move at a high speed, and I think does a lot of good work in transition, which could really mesh well with Connor Bedard's skill set. And then he's someone who does play with a high motor and is pretty strong, particularly from what I've seen in his lower body. I think that helps him obviously with his skating speed, but he has a good center of balance. And I think it allows him to play a little bit more feisty and a little bit more rugged than I think people expect for a player of that size. He also transitioned to playing the center ice position for Magnitogorsk for what I believe is the first time in his career this season. I do expect him to be a winger at the NHL level, but I like to see from some of the highlights and the video clips and the breakdowns that I saw on Kantserov's full 200-foot game, like he makes a concerted effort to be a responsible defender, and he uses that high motor of his with and without the puck. And just looking at kind of how he covered in the defensive zone, I forget exactly whose breakdown it was, but I was really impressed by the amount of chances that Kantserov got in transition, while B, also still being below the play more times than not defensively, not cheating to go and get offense. So I think Kantserov is going to be another, high motor, good all around type of player for the Blackhawks. I do feel like, the offense is what he's going to be known best for, but I don't think he's a slouch on the defensive side of things either. And I think, clearly Kyle Davidson that's kind of a mold that he's enjoyed going to in the NHL draft. Guys who can play with pace on the offensive side of things, but can also use that speed and that skill set of theirs to help the team out defensively. And even though Roman Kantserov is 5'9", he's going to have a tough time physically. I'm really interested to see how that transition is going to go for him, but I do think he has enough tools to get by at that speed. So there are at that size, excuse me. So there are my thoughts on Roman Kantserov being expected to sign his entry-level contract with the Blackhawks, as he and Magnitogorsk have officially terminated his KHL contract. Has not put pen to paper just yet, but that's expected to be happening in the coming weeks. And by the way, because Kantserov is only 21 years old, it will be a 3-year entry-level contract whenever he does officially sign that deal. But that takes care of my thoughts on Roman Kantserov officially coming over to North America. Let me know down below in the comment section, Blackhawks fans, how excited you are that this is finally going down. Coming up in just a moment, make sure to stick with me for segment 2 as I'll get into my better late than never Blackhawks end of season awards. But first, got to talk to you all about one of today's sponsors here on Locked On Blackhawks, which is Rocket Money. And if you've ever opened your bank account and thought, where did all my money go? You're not alone. Keeping track of subscriptions, spending, and bills can get overwhelming fast, but that's where Rocket Money comes in, helping you take control of your finances all in one place. It tracks all of your subscriptions in one spot and can help cancel the ones that you don't need with just a few taps. It makes everything feel more organized and gives you a clearer picture of your finances day to day. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and also helps lower your bills so that you can actually grow your savings. Go and let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster by visiting rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Again, that's rocketmoney.com/lockedon to cancel your unwanted subscriptions today. Also got to talk to you all real quick about HIMS. ED is way more common than most guys think. Millions of guys have to deal with it at some point, and that's exactly why HIMS offers a straightforward way to now handle it. HIMS connects you with licensed healthcare providers online, giving you access to legitimate treatment options from the comfort of your home. No awkward appointments, no pharmacy lines, just a straightforward process that makes it easier to take care of yourself. And the whole process is super simple. You just complete a quick online intake and a provider reviews your information. So to get simple online access to personalized and affordable care for ED, hair loss, weight loss, and more, go and visit hims.com/lockedon today. Again, that's hims.com/lockedonnhl. Segment 2, before I start getting into my Blackhawks individual season recaps, something I do on the show every single summer. Those will be starting on tomorrow's episode, by the way, so make sure to keep your eyes out for that. But today I wanted to go through not every player on the roster, but wanted to go through a slew of them before talking through every individual, where I'll be reflecting on their year, talking about the good and the bad, and then ultimately we'll give them an individual grade. But I wanted to go through some of the Blackhawks on an individual basis briefly and talk about the good and the bad from a handful of them in my Blackhawks end of season award. Starting off with team MVP, which I really do think, obviously Connor Bedard is the most logical choice here. However, if you break down who really meant the most to the Blackhawks, I do think you could make a case for a co-MVP between Bedard and Spencer Knight, because when the Blackhawks were at their best here in 25-26, which was undoubtedly up until Bedard got injured on December 12th against the St. Louis Blues, the first couple of months of the season, Bedard, that's when, he was right around the same, he was in the top 5 in the NHL in scoring and was really on the same track as Macklin Celebrini, who went on to have the year that he did. Bedard was right there along with him before he suffered that shoulder injury, and we were seeing him. One thing I talked about in particular on the show and the differences we were seeing out of Connor Bedard, not only was he, of course, faster, he was feistier, he was more well-rounded, better defensively, better at the face-off dot. I mean, he literally improved every aspect of his game. But I really think what stood out to me and the biggest difference in his first couple of years and what he did in the first couple of months of this season was he was regularly having those 3 to 4 point nights. And even kind of just looking at his second half of the season when he returned after that injury, he really wasn't having those 3 or 4 point games where he was the most dominant player on the ice and capitalizing on it. That was happening pretty regularly in those first couple of months. It seemed like every other game or every 3 games, Bedard was putting up 3 points. He was putting up 4 points. And that's where he truly flashed the, generational talent ability, or he can be a game changer in this league for truly the first time on a somewhat consistent basis. Obviously, as a rookie and as a sophomore, we saw some blips, but that was really the first significant stretch where Bedard looked like one of the biggest game breakers in the entire NHL. So because of that, I think you obviously have to put Bedard in the team MVP category. However, I feel like Spencer Knight's performance for the Blackhawks was also it weighed very heavily in terms of why they got off to such a good start, because Spencer Knight, those first couple of months, while Bedard was right there in like the Hart Trophy conversation, it felt like Spencer Knight was in the Vezina Trophy conversation with the way that he was performing on a consistent basis, which I think was super impressive considering it was his, first real opportunity to be a number 1 netminder in this league. Looking at Spencer Knight's opening 44 starts of the season, ultimately, things went the way they did in the second half as the Blackhawks sold off more pieces. The defensive unit in front of him only got younger and more experienced. Mistakes were going to happen, and that kind of cost Spencer Knight some really good numbers. He ended up finishing with a 19-25-11 record, along with a 2.82 goals against, a 902 save percentage, and 3 shutouts. And right around the midway point of the season, that goals against was right about 2.5 to 2.6, and that save percentage was above 910. So those numbers kind of dropped as the season progressed with the way that things went for the Blackhawks. But looking at Spencer Knight's first 44 starts of the season, which I believe was right up until just before the Olympic break, he had allowed more than 3 goals only 6 times in those first 44 starts. He was incredible. And I remember his first real hiccup that he had with the Blackhawks was during that Canadian road trip that the Hawks had right around Halloween into early November. That game against the Winnipeg Jets where he gave up 6 goals, that was his first start where he wasn't on his A game, it felt like. And more often than not, he did have his best stuff in the first half of the season. And that was a huge reason why, along with Bedard really becoming a consistent game breaker, why the Blackhawks were right in the wild card conversation up until Bedard and Nazar went down in an 8-day stretch. So I really do think, in terms of the most valuable player for the Blackhawks this season, when they were playing their best hockey, it was both the result of what Connor Bedard was doing offensively and also what Spencer Knight was doing in between the pipes. So because of that, I am going to give out co-MVP awards for the Blackhawks this year, splitting between Connor Bedard and Spencer Knight. The next end of season award I wanted to get into is the most improved player, which I felt like you could have also given Bedard because, just like I outlined a moment ago, I think he improved literally every aspect of his game here in year 3. But I have to give this award to none other than Louis Crevier, man, who it really felt like there's still a lot of things to figure out on the Blackhawks back end moving forward in this rebuild. Do they have a legitimate number 1 defenseman? That's kind of a question they really need to ask themselves before the NHL draft, because if Ivar Stenberg doesn't wind up being there at number 4, like I talked about on yesterday's episode, seems to be a better chance of that than initially expected, but I'm still pretty wary he's going to be available there. And if he's not, it feels like McKenna, Stenberg, and Malhotra are likely going to be the first 3 players off the board, and that leaves the Blackhawks going with the defenseman route more likely than not. So they need to ask themselves that question. There's still a lot to be figured out on the back end, and I don't want to officially go and pencil Louis Crevier in as a puzzle piece, but man, it feels like he could be a very effective defensive-minded third pairing, maybe number 5, maybe number 6 guy one day down the road. And that's pretty incredible considering this guy was like a project 2020 7th round pick that the Blackhawks drafted. And not only was I really impressed with what Louis Crevier did defensively this year, especially for someone who regularly plays in the defensive zone, is out there on the Blackhawks penalty kill, his reach and his length and size, along with Alex Vlasic on the back end, really, I think, was an underrated part of the Blackhawks' success while shorthanded this season. But when Louis Crevier did get opportunities in the offensive zone, he made the most of it. And one thing I talked about time and time again on the show, whenever going through my Blackhawks, part by parts throughout the course of the season, Louis Crevier, even though he rarely played in the defensive zone, was so effective at getting pucks on net. And I still think that's a page that not only the rest of the Blackhawks defensemen, but kind of the rest of the team as a whole can learn from. It just feels like the Blackhawks, and listen, I know every time you get the puck at the blue line, it's not the smartest idea to just go and shoot it. I am not saying that. There are times and places for it, but I feel like Louis Crevier just takes advantage of the simple play in front of him, and it paid off for him this year as he led all Blackhawks defensemen in goals with 7, leapfrogging Wyatt Kaiser in the final game of the season, which he had some funny comments, threw some funny jabs towards Kaiser about that during his final interview with the Blackhawks media. Might have Kaiser owing him a dinner or something like that. But Crevier also led all Blackhawks defensemen with 25 points this year. If you told me back in September that Louis Crevier was going to have more goals and more points than both Artem Levshunov and Sam Rinzel, I would not have believed you whatsoever. Now, I do think that is a result of neither Rinzel nor Levshunov having a very ideal first pro season, but it still can't be looked at as a knock on Crevier whatsoever. It was undoubtedly a super impressive season. And while I don't think plus minus is, a very indicative stat, I always talk about the outliers in terms of the plus minus. And I think Louis Crevier finishing with a -2 plus minus rating while playing in 78 games this year for the second worst team in all of hockey, while regularly starting in the defensive zone or playing in defensive situations, I thought that was pretty incredible. So to me, I couldn't really give this most improved award to anyone else besides Louis Crevier, because I really thought he took his game to a different level and potentially cemented himself as a possible, third pairing defenseman for the Blackhawks in their rebuild. I don't think he's ever going to be, a top 4 type of guy, but he's someone you can feel comfortable with putting him in those defensive situations, playing him on the penalty kill because of his size and his length. So great stuff from Louis Crevier this season. He winds up with the most improved award. Now getting into the Blackhawks Rookie of the Year award. This one, I'm going to give to Ryan Green, which almost in a similar sense to Louis Crevier leading all Blackhawks defensemen in goals and points this year. If you told me back in September that Ryan Green was going to lead all Blackhawks rookies in goals and points, I just really wouldn't have believed you. And that's exactly what happened. Is Green was not only the leading rookie goal scorer on the team, he was 7th on the Blackhawks with 12 goals, 8th on the Blackhawks with 29 points, more than both Artem Levshinov and Sam Rinzel, who I just thought had higher ceilings because of the opportunities that they were going to get. And I really expected Ryan Green to begin his professional career at the AHL level with the Rockford Ice Dogs. Didn't even play a single game for them as a rookie. Didn't even get sent down to Rockford one single time. And the only reason he didn't play in all 82 games as a rookie is because Jeff Blashill randomly decided to healthy scratch him in the team's final game before the Olympic break, which didn't make any sense whatsoever. I don't think Ryan Green was an ideal line mate for Connor Bedard, but him playing on the first line, even if he was kind of used, I think, out of character in terms of how the Blackhawks are going to utilize him long term. And as I mentioned, I don't think he was the ideal line mate for Bedard. But the fact that between he and Andre Burakovsky, Green was the more consistent between the two. And I also feel like defensively, I think he's more so going to be utilized as a third or fourth line center, but there are little parts of his game. And this is one detail that Jeff Blashill talked about a lot with Green, like the little plays and the hockey IQ and just being in the right spots. Yes, there were some rookie mistakes, of course, along the way, but more times than not, he was in the proper position. And I do think long term, when he's in a more natural role, probably down in the bottom six, that's really going to do him some favors. But I think he proved that what he did in college, never going to be a point per game player in the NHL, but I think he showed that some of those offensive skills can translate at the highest level. And I had questions about that coming into Ryan Green's rookie year and just in general for him at the NHL. So I was really pleased with what we got out of Ryan Green this year. Do I think he's going to be back on the top line with Connor Bedard to begin next season? Better not be, because it's time for the Blackhawks to take some steps. And no knock on Green, but that's not putting him nor Bedard or the Blackhawks in the best position to succeed as a team. But altogether, it was a very strong first year out of Ryan Green, and I'm excited to see how he's going to continue to develop his game in a different role moving forward. Next up, my Unsung Hero Award. I think this is a pretty obvious one. It's got to go to Ilya Mikheyev, man, who had another excellent season with the Blackhawks, and I really hope Kyle Davidson can find a way to bring this guy back, because he's one of those players who, and I had a conversation, I think it was with Jay Zawoski from CHGO about this, he's not one of those players who is going to help make a bad team good like the Blackhawks, but he is someone who can help make a good team great because of the way he goes about his business defensively. I mean, he's one of the best defensive forwards in the entire league, one of the best, if not the best, shorthanded forward in the NHL. I mean, a huge reason why the Blackhawks had the best penalty kill in the league this year. His size, along with his skating ability. One thing I don't think people recognize about Ilya Mikheyev is he's a big boy. He's like 6'3". He's got some thickness to him. And when you combine that with the way that he moves out there on the ice, I mean, he can just pressure opposing players into making, mistakes out there, really good with an active stick to go and force turnovers. And then offensively, while he didn't pot 20 goals like he did last year, was still third on the team in that category with 18, fourth on the Blackhawks with 36 points. And he did all of that without, unlike his first year with the Blackhawks, where he got some opportunities with Connor Bedard because there was a rotating door of players on that top line wing with him, Mikheyev was on the third line for basically the entire season. So for him to put up those offensive numbers that he did, and like Louis Crevier, a respectable plus minus. I actually don't have it right in front of me. I'm going to look it up. I meant to write this down, but I believe Ilya Mikheyev finished as a +4 on this Blackhawks team, which is just absolutely ridiculous. Again, he was a +2. For him to even have a positive plus minus on this bad of a Blackhawks team with the role that he plays is super significant. Undoubtedly, Ilya Mikheyev, while it didn't result in a lot of wins for the Blackhawks this year, was their unsung hero. Now, going in a little bit of a different direction, the biggest disappointment award, which is something I give out every single year here on the show, there's definitely a handful of candidates that you could give this to. One of them, I think the first name that pops up into most Blackhawks fans' minds is Andre Burakovsky. You could also potentially go the Artem Levshinov route, just because defensively it was a nightmarish first season for him in the NHL. I'm actually going to go with Teuvo Teravainen, Blackhawks fans, and maybe I'm a little bit biased here. If you're a regular listener or viewer of the show, then you know my disdain for the way that Teuvo Teravainen goes about his business. The reason, though, I am really giving this to Teravainen is because of the expectation. It, to me, was between Burakovsky and Teravainen. But with Burakovsky, we knew he's had 3 down years in a row ever since leaving the Colorado Avalanche. So even though the Blackhawks bought low on him, it was a good trade by Davidson. There weren't super high expectations for Burakovsky coming in. And I wouldn't say like the expectations were the highest for Teuvo Teravainen, but he was certainly expected to be better than what he produced, which was the tied for the lowest point total that he's ever produced as an NHLer, going back to his first full year in this league when he was with the Blackhawks. Ended up producing 35 points. Dreadful considering the way that he was utilized by the Blackhawks, was on the top power play for a majority of the season, suited up in 75 games, and he had just 35 points, scored only 14 goals. Here's the real kicker for me, Blackhawks fans. In 75 games, Teuvo Teravainen had 15 even strength points, offered nothing to this team at 5-on-5 defensively. I didn't think he was as good as he had been in the past. He was fine on the penalty kill this year, but what really drives me up a wall with Teuvo is how passive he plays out there on the ice. He's not physical. He's not very good in board battles because he's not super engaged there. Even though he's not like the most undersized player, he's just timid. And with the puck on his stick, he's timid. He doesn't like to shoot the puck. And his playmaking wasn't good enough at 5-on-5 whatsoever this year. So to me, because of kind of the expectation, well, I do believe Burakovsky's second half was worse than what we saw from Teravainen all season long. I expected Teuvo to be far better than this and put up more points considering the way that he was utilized. And because he was so bad, Jeff Blashill put him down on the 4th line to conclude this season. So tough year for Teuvo Teravainen, the worst of his NHL career, in my opinion. Next award I want to give out is my Blackhawks Legends Award, which, if you know me, you follow me on X, you follow at Talkin' Hockey on X, I talk a lot about Blackhawks legends who are, of course, not actually Blackhawks legends. But what I mean by the Blackhawks Legends Award is, who are we going to go when we look back at the Blackhawks 25-26 roster on Hockey Reference or whatever it may be in 5 or 10 years down the road? Who are we going to completely forget was a member of this team? And that's why we call them Blackhawks legends, because it's sarcastic. I think the number one option is Andrew Mangiapane if the Blackhawks buy him out this summer, because if he doesn't return, he's only going to have played 10 games with the team. Unfortunately, suffered an injury, so we didn't get a better look at him, but he would be a classic Blackhawks legend. You could also go the Shea Weber route if you wanted to, because the Blackhawks acquired his contract at the 2025 trade deadline. Ryan Ellis you can have in the same conversation, although he's still going to be on their books next year while Shea Weber will not. But let's say Andrew Mangiapane does come back to the Blackhawks for 26-27. My Blackhawks Legend Award is going to go to Dominic Toninato, because no one will remember Dominic Toninato playing for the Hawks. And then last, but certainly not least, want to talk about my favorite moment of the season. And go and drop down below in the comment section what your favorite moment for the Blackhawks was throughout the course of this year. I got a handful of honorable mentions that I want to bring up, going through some of the good times, most of them coming back in October and November. My favorite early moment of the season, honorable mention here, was the Blackhawks waxing the Blues 8-3 in their own building. That one was absolutely awesome. I think it was a week later, or maybe it was the next game. Can't remember exactly, but Ryan Donato's late game-winning goal on the road against the Tampa Bay Lightning. That was an ESPN game at the time, so I was super excited the Blackhawks fought hard and pulled out that win on the road. There was also Connor Bedard's first hat trick of the season in his 4-point game against the Ottawa Senators. That was a super fun game at the United Center. But my real moment of the season, maybe unfairly, I'm going to split this one into two. But the reason I'm splitting it into two is because it was what Connor Bedard did against the Calgary Flames in an 11-day stretch. Absolutely loves playing Calgary. He had a 4-point game on home ice against the Flames, recording his no, that one wasn't, excuse me, I got those mixed up. He did have the 4-point game on the road in Calgary, but I believe it was a Tyler Bertuzzi hat trick. Bedard had 3 assists along with a goal himself. And then 11 days later, back on home ice, no. Sorry. I apologize. I'm remembering these incorrectly. Bedard's 4-point game where he had 3 assists was at home against the Calgary Flames. And then 11 days later, went on the road, had the hat trick against Calgary, his second of the season, capped off by arguably his best goal of the season, Deacon Dustin Wolf out of his absolute jock. And that's when the Blackhawks were really rolling there in early November, probably playing their best hockey of the season up until they had that heartbreaking meltdown in the third period against the Seattle Kraken, which, as I've talked about a couple of different times, really felt like that was the turning point in the Blackhawks' entire season. But there are my Blackhawks end of season awards. Let me know down in the comment section below, again, what your favorite Blackhawks moment of the season was and whether you agree or disagree on the players that I've given these awards to. Coming up in just a moment. Before I close out today's episode, still have to get into a beefy Blackhawks prospects update. But first, got to talk to you all about Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inboxes overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, that is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And Indeed sponsored jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, skills-wise, experience-wise, and also based on location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So go and spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, that's a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of the show, you will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium status it deserves over at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now, and then make sure you support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this very podcast. Again, that's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply, and if you're hiring, go and do it the right way and do it with Indeed. Segment 3, it's been a while since I last broke down what's been going on with the Blackhawks prospects who found themselves playing postseason hockey. Back in April, I did already go through Nathan Bain and the Kamloops Blazers getting knocked out early in the WHL playoffs. That was the Hawks' lone WHL prospect this year. The NCAA season, of course, has been over for a while now. Anton Frondel came over and joined the Blackhawks after Yeargarden got knocked out of the SHL playoffs. So up until last night, the only two leagues left involving Blackhawks prospects playing in the postseason were the Ontario Hockey League and the United States Hockey League. And the OHL playoffs officially ended last night. And congratulations is in order for Jack Pridham and the Kitchener Rangers for claiming the league championship, their 5th in franchise history, first since 2008, as they swept the Barrie Colts in the OHL championship and lost just 2 games in the entire postseason. They swept Saginaw in round 1, beat the Sioux Greyhounds 4-1 in round 2. Then Pridham and the Rangers took down fellow Blackhawks prospect AJ Spellacy and the Windsor Spitfires 4-1 in the conference final before making quick work of Kashawn Aitchison, 2025 first-round pick, who scored some epic goals to try and have Barrie claw their way back into that series. But unfortunately for them, they just weren't able to do so. But the Rangers roll right through them in the championship series to claim the J. Ross Robertson Cup. So huge congratulations to Pridham. Super excited for him. And what a year it was for Prid. 2nd in the OHL during the regular season, of course, with 46 goals. 5th in the league with 90 points. Just one of 5 players in the league to produce 90 points this season. Didn't, find the back of the net or produce at the same rate for Kitchener in the postseason, as he had just 2 goals and 17 points in 18 games. But still, altogether, a heck of a final year in the OHL for Jack Pridham, capped off by a championship. And going back to the fall, remember, Pridham was originally committed to Boston University. He was going to make the transition to college hockey, but ultimately ended up returning to Kitchener, which I broke down at the show at the time. I completely understood it then because Pridham knew the role that he was going to be playing for the Rangers this year as a top-line guy was excellent for them after he left the BCHL and joined them in the middle of the 24-25 season, whereas transitioning to the NCAA, well, yes, he would have faced older and better competition. That definitely could have helped his development. There was no guarantee what type of role he was going to see as a first-year player for the Terriers, and as we all know too well, because Sasha Boisvert played for BU this year, that program was a nightmare. So it feels like Pridham not only dodged a bullet by electing to return to Kitchener, but absolutely made the right decision as he helps his team win the league championship. So I thought that was super cool, but I'm really interested to see what's going to come next for Jack Pridham because according to Elite Prospects, I believe he still has a commitment to BU, even though he elected not to join them last year. I think he can still transition to the Terriers for the 26-27 season, where if that's what he did decide to do, Caleb Malhotra and Tynan Lawrence, two of the best forwards in the 2026 NHL draft class, that's where they're committed to for next season. So that would be a very fun forward group. But I also do wonder if Kyle Davidson and the Blackhawks front office feel like Pridham is ready for the professional level. And of course, we have seen Kyle Davidson be a little bit more aggressive with these types of situations, even when it feels like guys could marinate a little bit more. The organization likes to have them under their guidance. So I wouldn't be super surprised to see Pridham end up signing his entry-level contract and playing for the Rockford Ice Hogs next year. But at the same point in time, there is no rush. The Blackhawks have a really deep prospect pool. The forward group is getting more and more crowded. I do think the most logical next step would be for Pridham going up one level in terms of the competition and playing with BU for 26-27. But we'll have to wait and see what winds up happening. But again, congratulations to Jack Pridham and the Kitchener Rangers for winning the OHL championship. Up next for them is the Memorial Cup, which starts 1 week from Friday. As for Merrick Vanacker and the Brantford Bulldogs, man, I really thought this was their year to come away with the OHL championship. Suffered a heartbreaker in the conference final after sweeping their way through the first and second round, starting off 8-0 in the postseason. They actually started out 11-1. They were up 3-1 on the Barrie Colts in the conference final, then lost 4-3 in overtime in Game 5, lost 4-3 in overtime in Game 6, and then in Game 7 in their own building, got skunked 5-0. That must have been such a painful kick to the midsection for that squad for how talented they were. I mean, Vanacker leading the OHL in goals. They get Jet Luchenko. They have Caleb Malhotra. They have Adam Juracek on the back end. I mean, the team absolutely loaded. I could not believe they blew that 3-1 lead. Very tough way for Vanacker to end his OHL career. He was good in the postseason too. He had 18 points, 8 goals and 10 assists in 15 playoff games. Man, really wanted to see and really expected to see Brantford go all the way with the talent they had on their roster, but get upset by the Barrie Colts in the conference final. And then, as I mentioned, AJ Spelcy and the Windsor Spitfires, they got in the way of the runaway freight train that was the Kitchener Rangers in the third round. Spelcy ended up producing 8 points, 3 goals, and 5 assists in 13 playoff games. Again, though, it's never really about the offense with Spelcy. He's going to be transitioning to pro hockey next season, and with his size and speed combination and the dog that he has in him, yeah, very excited to see what this kid has in store. And then last but certainly not least, the USHL, of course, only one Blackhawks prospect in that league. That's 2025 first-round pick Mason West. Unfortunately, West's season came to an end last night as the Fargo Force dropped a do-or-die Game 5 in the conference final to the Sioux Falls Stampede, losing 3-2. West produced 6 points, 2 goals, and 4 assists in his 9 postseason games during the regular season after helping a Dino win a state football championship, transition to the USHL, and I think pretty impressively had 25 points, 10 goals, and 15 assists in 38 games, even though he had hung up the skates in terms of game action for a couple of months there. And then, of course, Mason West is going to be attending Michigan State in the fall for his freshman season of college hockey, and that team looks like it's going to be absolutely loaded. AJ Spelcy's teammate Ethan Belchetz, who's expected to be a first-round pick in this year's draft, announced yesterday, kind of surprisingly, that he's going to be joining Michigan State. That is going to be a stacked team, and I'm very excited to see where Mason West is going to fit into the Spartans forward group. But that's going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. As always, Thank you all again for joining me on the show. Make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and also go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way, you can get the latest video or audio as soon as it gets uploaded every day. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. If you want to follow me on X, you can do so at Jack Bushman2. My Strictly Blackhawks account can be found at Talkin' Hockey. Until tomorrow's episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Wednesdays. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.